Welcome to our lecture series for really two entities tonight, three actually. The College of Architecture and Design at Lawrence Tech, University of Detroit Mercy, the School of Architecture, represented tonight by their Dean Will Wittig. Will, hold up your hand. There he is way in the back. Former Dean Steve Vogel. Faculty, students, all welcome, and thank you for co-sponsoring, and we look for many more co-sponsorship opportunities with you in the future. And the Detroit Regional Chapter of USGBC, who is also a co-sponsor of this event, and thank you very much, USGBC, and you all are in the back as well. Why is it that the sponsors always sit in the back? I don't know. Just another announcement is that for those of you that require AIA continuing education credit, there is a podium outside that you can sign up for. Even if you don't know your number, it's okay. Once they enter your name, your number will pop up. But if you do know your number, it's good to verify it that way so someone else doesn't get your credit. It's true. So we are very pleased tonight to have as our speaker Doug Farr, AIA LEED AP. And Doug Farr is the founding principal of the architecture and urban design firm Farr Associates. Based in Chicago, the firm is widely regarded as one of the most sustainability-oriented practices in the country, recently certifying its 6th LEED Platinum building. Doug was the founding chair of the USGBC's LEED for Neighborhood Development, otherwise known as LEED-ND, Core Committee. This is the interdisciplinary group of professionals that created this first ever rating system for sustainable land development. Launching in 2009, LEED-ND integrates smart growth, walkability, and green building practices into standards and metrics that scale up the sustainability to a neighborhood level. Based on his firm's pioneering sustainable design practice and his insights gained from chairing LEED-ND, Doug authored the urban planning best-selling book, Sustainable Urbanism, Urban Design with Nature, in 2008. So please, without further ado, welcome our speaker tonight, Doug Farr.
Thank you, Dean Leroy. Good evening, everybody. How we doing? Great. All right. So who's a student? All right. Hands down. All right. Who's a teacher? Practitioner? Architect? Planner, USGBC member, LEED accredited professional, member of CNU, Congress for New Urbanism. Anybody? None? Okay. What did I forget? Engineer. Okay. Okay. The engineer called out the engineer. We'll grant one or two more special interest call outs like that. How about former deans? Right. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for coming. It's a good group. It's really an honor to be here. This is a homecoming. I'm a Detroit boy. Did I press the right button here? Is that working? Is that what you want?
Hold the button down.
Should it go red or not?
Red.
Red. Like that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you want to kill this one? Thank you. Anyway, great to be here. Homecoming, Castech boy, University of Michigan grad, and really the things I have to talk about tonight have their roots in Detroit and my upbringing here. I like to say to people I grew up on the east side, took the 75 Russell bus down to the 51 Hamilton bus and transferred to Castech, and then climbed to my drafting class on the 8th floor, if you can believe that, climbed the stairs every morning to learn how to use a sharpener. People of a certain age remember that. You had to sort of sand every piece of lead you used, and your hands were always sort of black and dirty. It was back in the old days before CAD. What's CAD? I don't know what that is. But anyway, so a lot of the things you're going to hear about today are closely related. So this is the book. You know, it's for sale on Amazon. I don't have any to sell tonight, but it is one of the things that we'll be talking about. So sustainable urbanism. Yes, if you could close the doors, I'd love that, because there's a cleaning crew that's really about to assault us, I think. So sustainable urbanism is, at its core, this idea that it's time to scale up sustainability. That the green building movement, I credit in the United States and frankly internationally with putting a focus and a technical rigor to the issue of sustainability. And green buildings, as you'll see, are hugely important in our world. And then there's an opportunity yet to build on that and to scale up to the next level. So here we go. So sustainability, we've been talking about it for a long time. I've had the pleasure of having some just really sweet things I got involved in my professional life that brought me into contact with all sorts of groups. The green building folk, the smart growth folk, the brownfield folk, the energy efficiency folk, the rainwater people, et cetera, et cetera. And it tends to be the case, and this is human nature, that you approach a big problem one little piece at a time. So the picture you see here is one of silos, and the suggestion being that a lot of people approach even huge comprehensive things through little narrow specialties. And it's a natural thing to happen, but I think it's the thing we probably have to work hardest to overcome. And so if you take away one theme, it is that we do need to work at an interdisciplinary level, at a higher level of integration. And I think some of the tools I'll be talking about, I hope, make it sort of obvious how you might do that. But as I said, the conversation about sustainability tends to focus on specialty items. And so here are three. Again, if you read the media, you would think that sustainability was about objects. It was about the complex fluorescent bulb, arguably now the LED bulb, the Prius, arguably now the electric vehicle, and then the green building, now maybe the platinum building or the living future, the net zero building. But the idea being that sustainability is about efficiency of objects. It is not about our lives, it's not about how we organize ourselves and so on. It's these narrow things. And there's this interesting phenomenon called Jevons paradox, which if you can Google it, but I'll tell you, basically it's the idea that as things become more efficient, we consume more of them. Makes sense, right? It's cheaper. So the person that invented, and this is a homegrown specialty here in Detroit, the better car, the more efficient car, the more fuel efficient car, the lighter car, that we think then reduces our demand for oil from countries that hate us. What happens when it gets in the hands of humans, sometimes that means they buy a house that's 3 or 5 miles further away from their job because it doesn't cost any more to live further away, right? So Jevons paradox. So the CAFE standards that have been enacted are accompanied by a study that proves that with those higher fuel efficiency standards, we'll actually drive 5% more miles. So anyway, you can't get there through efficiency alone. Right? And this idea of starting small, medium, large, and the sustainability discussion often trails off at the scale of the building. People aren't sure what to say or what to do at a scale larger than a building. And LEED, I'm a USGBC member since the 20th century. We joined in 1999, so I've been at this a long while, as have my friends. So totally drank the Kool-Aid, continue to drink the Kool-Aid. We're about to certify our 7th platinum building. That may be the global leader, but there's a friendly competition. Who cares, right? We're all doing great work. So, and we all know LEED. What I'd like to talk about, though, is the history of LEED and sort of where it came from. LEED, the term was coined in 1996 by Rob Watson, and it spells out what it spells out. But the thing to know about LEED is that it started out with the premise that the way to solve the world's environmental problems was one building project at a time. One building on a lot at a time. And so LEED went out and arguably conquered many markets and the world by doing that. And so it's a good thing. And I should probably not show this one, but just suffice it to say that you can get a great building. This is a wonderful building, a LEED Platinum building, but look at its context. It has no spillover benefit. It's parking lots, it's diverse, it's concrete and asphalt on an unwalkable street. And so the standalone LEED building isn't necessarily solving all the world's problems. And you'll get phenomenon like this one. This is a town of West Brazos, Texas. You probably have the means to point at it. Excuse me. Is that it? Whatever. Is there a pointer coming on? No. Oh, thank you. Turn it on.
red button in the middle.
There we go. Okay, so this is the town of West Brazos, Texas. It's sort of south of Houston. And there was an existing small town elementary school. You can visualize one as, I think it was 2 stories tall, on one block in the city, no parking lot, students, teachers, everybody walked to school. So what happened? The town got the bright idea of making a new green building. So green school, replacing this one. Where did they put it? Out on the, out on the highway, down here. So they moved it from in town, no parking lot, walk to situation, 3 miles out of town on a highway, and make it a LEED certified school, right? So this got no plaque, this got a plaque. One of the features that the new school claimed as one of its environmental achievements was that it was filtering the stormwater that ran off its new parking lots. When ironically, the old school didn't have any parking lots because everybody could walk there. So obviously, one building at a time without taking into account where the thing is and whether it's building a community or a city or not is not going to get us there. And this is a cheap shot joke slide. Please laugh. Right. So this is not actually a LEED anything, right? It is just an eye trick, right? But it does raise this question, could this be LEED certified, right? Of course it could, absolutely. But what questions would LEED ask about the absurd escalator heading up to the health club, right? It would ask, is the escalator efficient? It would ask, is the stainless steel on the panels recycled or virgin, right? But can't ask the obvious question is, what the hell are you thinking, right? That's just a crazy thing to do, right? So again, LEED was written by human beings. It's necessarily imperfect by that definition, but it is the best thing we have. To just throw your heart and soul into it and use it, but recognize its limits. There are the things that LEED doesn't take on that are arguably crushing national issues right now. This is the obesity maps. If you've never seen them, you can go on the Centers for Disease Control website, just do obesity maps, PowerPoint, boom, and they'll spit out for you by year an animation that will make make you unhappy. But here we go. This is 1985. You can see the scale on the map is less than 10% obese, 10 to 14% obese. And how are we doing in Michigan? We are no data. Well, that was a pretty sweet spot to be in 1985. So fast forward 2010, and the country has gone, from blue to red, and red in this case is not political persuasion so much as weight. So this is, 30 pounds overweight for a 5'4" frame. So, vast stretches of the country are more than 30% obese, right? We pay for this in healthcare costs, we pay for this in limited quality of life for people, et cetera, et cetera. It's declared by the Centers for Disease Control a public health epidemic of the first order. The built environment is implicated in it. It's not the full answer. Clearly soft drinks, fast food, et cetera, diet. But our physical inactivity of the places we design and occupy can have a lot to do with it. And so this is a quote from the book that comes from the National Institutes of Health. Over the next few decades, life expectancy can be expected to decline by as much as 5 years, right? So as a species, you're pretty good if your life expectancy is going up, and something's going wrong if it goes the other way. So we Americans, have done that. So, and here's the other sort of statistic: 250 to 400,000 premature deaths due to lifestyle factors. So, number of people killed in fires in the United States annually, any guess? 5,000. So this is on the high end, 80 times more. Of those fires, half of them are cars, half of them are buildings. So when you design a building, and the fire marshal leans on you to make sure that the fire stair conveys people safely out of a building in the case of a fire, but makes it unattractive to climb the stairs, he's addressing the 1% problem, not the 100% problem. So anyway, there's an interesting disconnect. And then we get these sorts of anomalies. This is less about LEED, but it is a little bit about how all of the building metrics, sustainability systems measure things. So these are charts of the average size of the American household. This is 1940 to 2000, so you can see it's gone down a little bit. It makes sense. The average size of the American home has gone up more than doubled in 60 years. And this is not a bad thing necessarily. This means we're wealthier. This means we have more choices. So there's a downside to it, but I'm not here to say, goodness, progress is a bad thing. But here you do end up with these sort of effects, right? The average per capita, per person size of a house back then was 260 square feet. It's now 800 square feet, right? So you get these anomalies in ASHRAE that is referenced by LEED. ASHRAE is the heating and cooling standard, to simplify it, where the efficiency of a building is measured per square foot. So Bill Gates has a house that's about 40,000 square feet. My house is about 2,000 square feet, and by ASHRAE, Bill Gates' house is more efficient than mine, because it's measured per square foot. And so there's a runaway aspect to the way we're measuring things that reveals to me that we haven't even turned around to confront the issues facing us. So I hope that this presentation is clear in that point. And then there's this assertion that when you travel the world, and arguably the country, but certainly the world, that in the United States we value quantity over quality, arguably. And so we like a lot of stuff. So here was a quote that happened actually the day after Election Day on NPR. And it just struck me as amazing. So this is a guy named Sean Durkin, built a 4,000 square foot house in Charlotte, North Carolina, wanted solar panels, but he gave up when he learned that it would cost $40,000 more. We'd love to have the panels if we could afford it. Now, this is if we could afford it, is stated by Sean Durkin, who just built himself a 4,000 square foot house, who somehow can't get together the scratch to put some solar panels on it, and then rationalizes this by saying, well, the return on investment, cash on cash, is a 20 or 25 year payback, a true statement. But what's interesting to me is look at the math here. If Sean Durkin had built himself a 3,600 square foot house, I think he'd been able to afford the solar panels. And actually, he wouldn't have needed $40,000 worth of solar panels. He would have needed $36,000 worth of solar panels. So it's the smaller the house, proportionally the smaller the investment in renewables, et cetera. So, but this is not just this guy, who I'm sure is a great guy. I have nothing against Sean, but this is us. This is kind of what our society values, is we'd much rather have the 4,000 square foot house and slough off as we can't afford that other stuff. So anyway, that's the country, that's sort of the shape of things, so enough about that. So Farr Associates, we're in Chicago, in the Monadnock building. If you've ever been to Chicago or read the history of Chicago skyscrapers, it's a great old building, 6-foot thick bearing wall, masonry bearing wall structure. And we have, a little firm with attitude. So we cop this attitude that implementing sustainable urbanism from room to region, where every increment of architecture aspires, and planning aspires to perfect the city. So we are about city building in increments. And so I hope to show you some examples of that. So first thing is just, we're celebrating our 21st year this year in business, and I'm just going to show you kind of the origins of what got us to why we have these attitudes and why we do what we do. So back in 1993, if you can visualize that, that was a long time ago, we got asked by a bunch of community groups to become involved in planning, a planning project. This is a corridor, transit corridor from Oak Park, Illinois on the left to the Loop in Chicago there. So it was then called the Lake Street L. It's now it was years ago renamed the Green Line, CTA Green Line, and it visited and stopped in this neighborhood called West Garfield Park. So in 1993, the concept, the term transit-oriented development was brand new. It came from California, from a book written by Peter Calthorpe. Ironically, it was based on how the streetcar and transit suburbs of Chicago and Cleveland and New York and Philadelphia had been done in the late 19th century. So it was re-importing into Chicago something Chicago essentially helped create, right? So we learned how to draw circles, and there were several students we met with this afternoon who were drawing circles, right? So it's the first thing you do in TOD is you draw a circle, you debate the size of the circle, you make sure the circle is centered on the station, and so on. But we came up with this, what we called a prototypical TOD for lake in Pulaski, and we called it, in 1993, we called it the sustainable kit of parts. These are the elements of land use that you want to have around. We thought they were universal. You wanted to have all of these around every CTA station or every transit station, arguably. So 1993, we really got lucky. Our clients, pro bono, CTA threatened to tear this line down. You know, it was an 8-mile line. It had served this neighborhood, for this community, for 100 years. CTA said, we're going to tear it down. And our little plan, kind of naive as it was successfully used to win the politics of finding the money to fix the thing. So $350 million later, that was really cool. So we had a little victory. Chicago was going to tear down its infrastructure, and we helped contribute to it. So that was 1993 Farr Associates' early kind of win. So at the same time, growing up in Detroit, I was really interested in cities and city revitalization, and also the car industry taught me to be really interested in energy and energy efficiency and green things. So in the 90s, we were trying to get green clients, and we just couldn't do it. People would meet us, and I was chair of the Committee on the Environment at AIA, and we'd meet people, potential clients. They'd say, tell me what your vision is for this environmental thing. I'd say, well, I think it's energy efficient, and it's a couple other things. And they would interview all the people who were my friends on the committee, and we would all tell them different things. One would say, I think it's about stormwater. One would say, I think it's about efficient material, or healthy materials. I think it's about good indoor air quality. And the clients were so confused, we never got any clients. With one exception. This is the Smith couple, which was a 10,000 square foot house. Oh my God, I'm gassed at it by now. But they were a mixed couple. He flew for American, she flew for United. So they were both pilots, right? So a mixed couple. That's big in the airline. Who are you married to? Oh my God, So anyway, but here it was, a solar house, R35 walls, geothermal, early kind of trying to get all the packages together. But, fledgling practice, trying to get off the ground, and so on. But anyway, so finally, so hold that thought. Fast forward on the TOD I showed you a minute ago, 5 years later, we got rehired by the neighborhood to do a more refined TOD plan for that station. So here was the form it took at the time. It was, this in the foreground is that elevated train that goes from Chicago to Oak Park. You can see here there's a U-shaped series of multi-story buildings wrapped around a park. This is a supermarket. It would have been the first supermarket for about a four square mile area. High disinvestment, no services, no goods, all that sort of stuff. Housing, shops, jobs, etc. And so this was our vision for TOD. And in 1998, we thought of this as a really sustainable project. And it was about brownfield reuse, transit ridership, densifying the city, adding missing goods and services to a neighborhood that hadn't had them in 50 years, and so on. So highly sustainable. The next year, in 1999, we finally broke through. And by broke through, I mean our little committee on the environment made contact with then Mayor Daley's staff and convinced them to commission a LEED certified building, 1999, called the Chicago Center for Green Technology. And it was, when we undertook it, there were no LEED platinum, there were no LEED anythings really, but there were no LEED platinum buildings at the time. So, but when we sold it to the mayor, he said, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it platinum, no ifs, ands, or buts, we got a project. And so my friends and I, Farr Associates took the lead, my friends and I worked on designing this building. Again, a very highly sustainable project, we thought, on the desk next to the previous project, right? So TOD, highly sustainable, LEED certified building, highly sustainable, and you can see all the elements, right? Vegetated roof, rooftop of solar panels. This is the retention basin that filters all the stormwater off the site. We put our geothermal heating and cooling system under it. Really cool stuff, right? And you get, here's the south. It was a 1952 building we reused. We did not build new, so that's also sustainable. The greenest building is one that already exists. And we put solar panels on the south facade, and they're angled such that the sun penetrates in the winter when you want it and doesn't in the summer when you don't. As I said, we put the geothermal field under the stormwater basin because the heat transfer is most efficient in saturated soil, so we call that integrated design. Both of these are integrated design elements. We stopped calling this what I'd called it all my life, which was a ditch. We started calling it a bioswale, and that amazed your friends. That was kind of fun. But anyway, so CCGT, highly sustainable, but the aha moment was there was no overlap, none at all, with the TOD project I showed you a minute ago. So that was about brownfield, transit ridership, density, mix of uses. This is about the things that LEED was about, and LEED wasn't about any of those things. This became the 3rd platinum building in the world, and it was the first LEED platinum to have public transit. And that said something to me about the values of LEED, that you could easily get platinum without it, right? So we went back and re-rendered that first drawing I showed you a minute ago. First of all, we went and bought brighter colored markers. That was like a big move. We must have made some money that year, I can't remember. But anyway, so get out of the drabs, we're into the brights here. So, but you can see also the ideas of CCGT are literally like oil on canvas draped on the old plan. So now our rooftop looks like a CCGT rooftop, vegetated roof, green bling in the form of PV and solar hot water panels and so on. And then the park, there it sits, but has been rethought as an instrument of common infrastructure. What do I mean by that? The vision here was that these buildings would not have their own heating and cooling systems, but there would be a central one housed in a greenhouse in the park, pipes underground, etc., geothermal shafts or wells, however you care to characterize them, in the park, and the park would filter the storm water. Water would flow from the street into the park and charge the groundwater and saturate the soil to make the heat transfer more efficient. And the premise was this would be owned by an ESCO. Each building would be cheaper to build. You don't have to have a mechanical system. You just contract for energy long term. So that was the vision. And oh my God, were we, gosh darn it, really excited, right? So at that point, though, this is 1999, we had a thing, an idea, which what do we call it? We had a different name for it, but this was essentially what became sustainable urbanism. Walkable, transit-served urbanism, integrated with high-performance buildings and high-performance infrastructure. And so you can see it's not the standalone building, it is a place. It is a place containing green buildings that then are reliant on some sort of high-performance infrastructure. So all these systems are working together. If you're a firm that's a design firm, you can see transit service, that might be a transit planner or an urban planner might be involved. Obviously, high-performance buildings is architects and mechanical engineers. High-performance infrastructure involving the civil engineers, the utility companies. So to fulfill this grand vision of integration requires a lot of players and a lot of cooperation, something that frankly doesn't happen really much in routine practice. So, 1999, we were convinced we had solved it, right? So we got hired by the RTA to prepare a TOD plan for South Suburban Orland Park. And here's the plan, and it was a pretty good plan. This is the train tracks. There's a 4-story hotel building we were putting with the train station in the lobby, streets that provide good sight lines and access. The streets are stormwater streets. We've added the green bling to the buildings, turned the drawing into our transit client, or transit-oriented client. And they said, love the plan, but all that green stuff, we didn't ask for it. It's confusing. Please take it away, right? It's like, goodness, they didn't like it. And so what we ended up doing here was turning this into a black and white drawing and turning it in, because you really can't tell. So here, 46th and Hiawatha, again, 1999, we're on the road show, going to prove the world that we really know what we're talking about. So another green TOD, 46th and Hiawatha, and this was a hell of a fight about density. Neighbors don't like density. They wanted a town center or a transit village center here. Maximum, when we started the process, 1.5 stories, right? That is not a town center at 1.5 stories. So we fought. The community worked and prevailed and ended up with a 4-story mixed-use town center, which is a very good answer for this place. But I asked the question, if all the buildings in this plan were green, could they be 1 story taller? And every hand in the room in 1999 went up. People didn't know, there wasn't LEED, there wasn't green building, it was just this idea of urbanism and density was made more appealing, and for a developer more profitable if it was paired with green. And so that, we felt like, aha, we're on to sort of something here, something's going on, right? And then we, again, 1999, showed up in Normal, Illinois. These guys are absolute troopers and heroes and everything. So we came up with this plan for, this is the Amtrak line that goes Chicago here, St. Louis there. And there was a whole jumble of streets. We proposed a circular resolution of all these, sort of the geometry of the spokes of the streets, and then a series of buildings around it. In 2002, the town of Normal, Illinois, and when that's your name as a town, you have to try harder. You really do. So in 1999, they voted to become the first municipality in the United States to require private sector LEED buildings. Normal, Illinois. So run through your mind, like who would you guess would be first? It'd be like Berkeley or Boulder or Austin or something like that. No, Normal, Illinois. So these are incredible leaders that stepped forward to do this. And so here you have it. We're finally drilling down on this idea of the stormwater park. You saw it in the Bethel plan, you saw it in the other plans, and we're getting closer. We've sort of sold them on the idea that that circular intersection can be a really cool place to gather, and that we can gather the rainwater off the streets and filter it and have it be a fun and positive amenity. So to deliver this kind of space, we had to figure out how to do something called write a form-based code. If you haven't heard about that, look it up. But basically, I think of it as like a reverse cake mold. You put over the top of a building lot, and it defines for you the surfaces that your building must touch, right? But anyway, so we delivered that rotunda, that cylinder of space, that way. The first building was designed by a local architect, fulfilled it's not an award winner, it's not a Starchitect building, but it fulfills what we needed it to do. An arcade, it's the minimum height, it has the materials and proportions we were after. So here's that circle. This was just finished in 2010, and there you have it. The landscape architect for this highly award-winning, Peter Lindsay Shout, deserves a lot of credit for his just mastery of design from the curb, you know, sort of across the circle. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous facility. If you're in the vicinity, go check it out. And you get this sort of scene going on. And I have to go back and say, this design broke more rules than any other project we've been involved in. What were the rules it broke? First off, traffic engineers believe human beings should not occupy the center of a circle like this. Why? Because they have a notion that the higher and better use for that land is something called a safe zone, or a free zone, I can't remember which it's called, which is there for the driver that might be approaching the intersection and loses control or falls asleep and needs some feet to come to a still safe stop. That's the purpose why people cannot occupy them. So we had a hell of a fight. People have heard me all day, get the mayor on your side. So we got the mayor on our side, and we fought for 2 years to get this approved. And the final resolution was, we tried to get it approved as it's called a roundabout, that's the formal engineering name. We got it approved as a circular intersection. And what's brilliant about this, there is no such thing as a circular intersection. So consequently, there are no rules governing them, and so there are no rules, we can't have broken any, and so they looked at, well, we got no objections, so, you know, there it was, approved. But, so that was, you know, a big set of, you know, rules broken. Here's another one. If you've designed any sort of public space with water in it, the guidance by lawyers and the profession is, don't make standing water deeper than 1/4 of an inch, because it's perceived as a drowning hazard. So here are children not drowning. It's what we all did as kids. It's now, in the kind of litigious world we're in, it's called not drowning. The expectation is eventually you will, right? So, but you know, unfortunately for the lawyers, the kids are just having a great time and the parents are egging them on. And then you really know you've sort of gotten it. You've gotten it. You know, a lot of the work we do around the country is working with cities that don't have an ocean, or don't have a mountain range, or don't have the civic opera, that they're trying to compete for talent, like the people in this room who have the freedom to locate a lot of places. The creative class is what Richard Florida calls it. What I believe this image is telling you is that, you know, in a small way, this is not the equivalent of the Rocky Mountains, but basically a facility like this that proposes a different lifestyle can be part of a long equation of an attractor to retain people that have choices. And so these are, you know, people with beer who could be anywhere, right? And having a good time and making the place look, you know, better by their presence. So that is the kind of the end of a line of talk I wanted to give you. I want to show you two projects that are architecture projects that I feel like fulfill this mantra of sustainable urbanism. And they're sort of two basic ideas. Let's see. One is, this is called the Yannell House. It is in Chicago. It is our 4th LEED Platinum building. It is a zero net energy building. It's on a city block. And you can see here it's got butterfly roofs, which are designed to catch rainwater, to put in a cistern to use to flush toilets. And guess what? That's illegal. You can't do that in Illinois. You can do it in 38 other states, but we ourselves could not do it. But what I want you to take from this is that this architecture project, while being super zero net, green, whiz bang, cool stuff, designed by my colleague Jonathan Boyer, is also a very good urban contributor. That back to that idea, every increment of the city, we're trying to perfect every increment of the city. So this is now, according to local neighbors, a destination jog. People will choose their jogging route to go by this house now because it's that cool, right? That induces pedestrianism. So this idea of what makes a place walkable or induces people to, jog or be physically active can be great architecture, right? So I think I'm missing one slide, but no matter, right? So here's another sort of urban scale project that I want to talk about. This is called Harper Court in Chicago, and it is very much a companion. It's just broken ground about 2 weeks ago, the last project that closed before we all completely crashed, right? So we were the urban designer and master planner for this. It's going to be 1,200,002 square feet and 3.5 acres, so it's really dense. But here's the street that I want to talk to you about. So normal, if you think about it, that circle was essentially, it's about 300 feet long. It goes in a circle to treat the stormwater. So what we did for this project was straightened out the circle into a linear element, right? My knock on normal, I have very few bad things to say about it other than this. It uses grid electricity, non-renewable electricity, to pump water for the delight of humans and to cleanse it, which is a good thing. So we're sort of trying to one-up ourselves with this project, and I'll just show you this detail. So what we proposed here at Harper Court is to take the normal circle, make it 300 feet long, put it on a long edge of a street here, and have it be only renewably powered. That is to say, it's designed for all the water to drain away if the sun isn't shining on the solar panels to power the pumps, or as a backup, humans are not actively pumping to get the water up. So we've sort of taken that whole non-renewable thing out of it and made it solely renewable. You want water? Cool, pump. Get to work. So we'll see how this goes. So it's under construction. We expect it to be done in a couple of years. I had my slides out of sequence here. So here is the project I wanted to say is also a sustainable urbanist project. This is a new restaurant for a top celebrity chef in Chicago, a guy named Rick Bayless. Pretty good food, Mexican. And so he asked to design his new restaurant, Shoko. And we worked with him and got the kitchen in the window. And back to this idea, what does it take to make a place pedestrian friendly? What does it take to induce people to walk by your building? Not walk in general, but walk to your thing. Totally this, right? If you love churros, which are just amazing, you like chocolate. He makes chocolate and he makes churros in the window. You walk by and it's like you're slayed on the sidewalk. So you really want to be there, right? So I think of this as incredibly sustainable stuff, and on the inside, of course, it's lovely and bright and so on. But this idea that every increment of architecture perfects the city 3 notches up. LEED doesn't care whether your kitchen's visible in the neighborhood and people stand there agog on the sidewalk just looking and drooling at the food, right? I think it's a really good thing, but it is also, perfecting the city. So that earlier slide was I apologize, out of sequence. Here's a second slide of Yannell residents, and you can see here, packing a lot in on a city lot, how it respects in some ways sort of urban conditions, that is to say setbacks and heights and things like that, but also is completely non-traditional compared to the buildings up and down the block. They're classic sort of 4 squares and simple stucco stucco buildings. You can see the butterfly roofs also are used to screen and hide the solar panels. We have both PV and solar hot water panels. And I'll just mention as an aside, the one thing that we're innovating in this project, and we're on year 2 trying to prove out the net zero stuff, is it's really hard come February and March in Chicago to heat off geothermal. Because we have the solar hot water panels, we figured out this last season, the weekend in July and August, take that excess heat from the solar panels and charge the earth with it. So our geothermal wells and the soil around it, in July and August, we are adding heat to that will sit there for 6 months. And it's not that big a change of delta, but in February we draw back on it to heat the house. And so that idea of annual storage of heat in the climate is just wild to me. So we're figuring this stuff out. But back to the idea of the jogging route, here's Yanel, 2 points of view, the one on the left and the one on the right. Charming, you love a good architect designed house, but this one also tells a different story. There's something going on with those roofs, there's something about water, and so on. So very, very excited about all that. So, Sustainable Urbanism, the book, right? It's been a heck of a fun thing to do. Andres Stwani, if you've ever heard of him, wrote the forward for the book. It is a bestseller, not to say it's Michael Crichton or anything like that. It's sold 12,000 copies in 3 years or so. And it's just been translated into simplified Chinese. So we're very hopeful to the Chinese students who we met today. Hopefully next summer you'll be able to get a copy in Chinese. There are case studies in the book. The reason we wrote the book was we were interested, as you can see the trajectory we're on, was we want to apply sustainability at a higher scale. So we sort of put out this call for case studies across the world. We got 200 case studies and culled them down to 20 best exemplars. The first question we had was to do something called sustainable urbanism. How much land do you need? What we first found, in this case, size doesn't matter, that you could be as small as 4 acres, 15, 120, thousands of acres, all of which exhibit the attributes of sustainable urbanism. I'm going to show you 2 that really, to me, stand out. And both are well published in certain circles, so if you've seen them before, I apologize, but they still impress me, after years of looking at them. First one is called Bedzed. This is in a suburb south of London. You can see here this is a plan. The buildings are in color. There's sort of a ring road. It's kind of a dopey site plan. It kind of doesn't go anywhere. The connectivity is bad, but its achievement, is here. The target for it was to see if a development could be built in a developed country that would provide a high quality of life within one ecological footprint. The idea that the American lifestyle requires 4 planet Earths and we only have 1. This was, let's live within 1. So that was the target. And the other target was to do it at no cost premium. Here's what it ended up looking like. So these are essentially south-facing attached townhomes with sun spaces and then commercial spaces tucked underneath. Why do it that way? The residential does need heat through the year, and the commercial tends to need cooling through the year. So why admit natural light into it and with it the heat? So here's Bedzed, and you can see the other thing to say is the peacock-colored these little wind vanes allow the units to be ventilated without use of mechanical anything. No electricity, no fans. It's just induced naturally. It's pretty cool. Here's the systems integration diagram that you'll often see, in projects like this. Rainwater's caught on the roof, used to flush toilets. The excess electricity generated from the PVs charges an electric vehicle. A biochip district heating system, provides heat to the whole place, blah, blah, blah. The systems were laid out by Arup. You've heard of Arup. They're famous for this kind of stuff. Several of the systems were failures and had to be redone, so we could talk about that in the Q&A or in the break or whatever. But what was powerful about this one is that it had this goal of 1 ecological footprint. They bothered to measure everything, and they believe they got to 1.2 ecological footprints. From the UK average of like 3.5 planets, they got to 1.2, right? And so the question was, how did they do it? How did they get from 3.5 to 1.2? And the finding was that 63% of the reduction of footprint came from physical design, solar panels, better insulation, better windows, things like that, things that architects and engineers control. And 37% of the reduction came from changes in conduct. People just behaved differently once they got there. And that intrigues me. If I, to the unemployed architects, and there may be a few of you in the audience, one of the things that I think is a complete frontier issue and suitable for this program at Lawrence University to take on is this question of designing conduct, right? Nobody knows how to do it. And you could completely start a new field from scratch, in my opinion, to take that on. So project number one. Project number two, case study, is Dockside Green. So that was 4 acres. This is 15 acres on the waterfront in Victoria, British Columbia. It's got a long list of attributes as well. The top on the list for me is this one. There's 26 buildings in this plan. We'll talk about the plan in a minute, but the proposal was that all of them would be LEED Platinum. And the developer, at the time the developer proposed this, the world supply of LEED Platinum buildings was 24. So there's 24 in the world. One little project, 15 acres in the corner of Canada, proposes to double the world supply kind of that afternoon, right? Pretty cool, right? Well, Detroit certainly has 15 acres available a few places, and every municipality in the region probably has 15 acres. So every town in the region, I think, should do this. That's what I think should happen here, in my humble opinion. So anyway, pretty cool stuff. So the other thing I failed to say is the developer posted a $1 million forfeitable bond if he didn't get all 26 buildings platinum. And who was this guy? He was clearly an environmentalist nut job, right? He's an accountant. He's a bean counter. He said it was the safest money I've ever posted. We designed it from the get-go to reduce my first cost of construction and produce the lowest long-term operating cost. And so everything here is a district system. No building has a heating system, a cooling system. They treat wastewater on site, stormwater on site, share cars, the whole list, right? Here's what a street next to the development looks like. This is a waterfront condition. Sounds like East Jefferson to me. And so here's a street, a complete street, and mixed use. They build boats on the ground floor and then live upstairs. But maybe the coolest thing, the story I love most about this, is that in the middle of that site plan there's a water feature. Now, the urbanists should have an issue with this. It's a big super block, the streets don't go through, but given that that's a sacrifice, what they got for it is they got this cool water feature in the middle, which is the polishing stage for their waste treatment system. So get this, they're selling townhouses. Actually, they get the highest dollar per square foot on the townhouses that face the waste treatment system. Yeah. So who did this? A wacky environmentalist, right? No, an accountant. Why? How did he do this? Water features, waterfront land always sells for the premium. So all they had to do was be confident in the quality and odor-free nature of their waste treatment, and they're making more money at being green. So isn't this a beautiful vision? I mean, don't you want to just take this home and do it, right? So that's the thought. So sustainable urbanism. So bringing it on home. So if you don't read the book, and a lot of people who own it don't read it anyway, so I'll just tell you what it says. The premise here is that sustainable urbanism will just be the norm in the world in 20 years. So that's the premise, global domination by 2030. So how do you take over the world? Well, we have a 3-step program to do just that. So the first one is to make this easy. Make all these fancy things we're talking about understood, tangible, and I go so far as to say establish weights and measures to make them a commodity. Don't compel people involved in this to have to spend 20 years getting a PhD in some arcane corner of specialty to do this. No, make it something that a team can see the common opportunity and work together towards achieving that. So this is part of what the book tried to do, was to establish commodities and common concepts and goals. First one is called the sustainable neighborhood. Now, planners, urban planners will recognize this as an update on a really old planning diagram from Clarence Perry from 1929. And there's the TOD circle too, the 10-minute walk, the street network, the civic buildings set aside, a variety of housing types in the neighborhood, and then in its day, this neighborhood was sized to support 1 elementary school. right? That's hard to do now, so we sort of adjusted it and said maybe an elementary school straddles 2 neighborhoods. But nonetheless, there's the basic Clarence Perry 1929 diagram. But it's been, several things have been addressed and arguably fixed. So stormwater, we don't want our cities to sort of cause the degradation of land nearby because they're just putting all their stormwater in a pipe and eroding and flooding and degrading water quality. So how do you do that? A normal instinct in LEED would be to say, well, every building in this neighborhood should have its own bioswale and its own detention basin. And so let's spread the buildings further apart and make the neighborhood less dense so that we can do stormwater where rain falls. I say, no, that's a good idea. Do as much as you can, but don't de-densify. There is a benefit to having a compact neighborhood like this that we could talk about. You don't want to do that. What you do want to do is do as much as you can on the roofs and in the spaces that are available, and then take the rest of it up at the edge of the neighborhood, right? And this is just a riparian corridor of not putting your river in a pipe, right? So Bob Gibbs, who here knows Bob Gibbs? Anybody? He's from Birmingham. He's, you know, my hero. He's written a book, by the way, finally. He's threatened for 20 years. He claims he's written it. So, but I bought him a beer, got him drunk, and he agreed to put this in the book. Because for years I wanted to know, Bob, I'm obsessed with, you know, if I want a corner store, I want a main street, or I want a sort of town center, how many households do I need to support that? I would say, Bob. And in a public lecture, I'd ask the question, he'd say, it always depends. And then at the bar, I got him one night, he said, 1,000. So I said, would you put that in a book? He said, oh, you're going to write a book? Sure. You know, you write a book, I'll put it in it. And then years later, that happened. So here it is, that neighborhood, what's the population of that neighborhood need to be? Depends on what amenities you want in it. A lot of people say, I love the convenience of having a quick trip to the store, the quart of milk, the quart of orange juice, the diaper, the Band-Aid, whatever it is, that's a good thing. And there's actual metrics now that tell us, guide us how to do that. And then you have the next sort of scaling up sustainability is the corridor. Now this is a gnarly, I think, to me, right now, my eyes, unattractive diagram, so I'm not going to let it be on the screen very long. It tries, in essence, in the footnotes that you can't read from anywhere, to lay out this simple idea that land use and mobility are as sort of glued together as your spine is to your flesh. Like you can't sort of have one without the other. So it tries to say, in this corridor, what kind of development do I need? What density, mix of uses, and so on, do I need along that corridor to support different modes of transit? And so there are actual numbers and diversities and mixes and place types that if you build them, that transit naturally performs and sustains over time. Absent the land use, you can run a bus wherever the hell you want. We talked about it earlier today. It won't be sustainable. So that's what this is about. It's simple rules of thumb. You also, I just want to talk about this too. In Detroit now, at a time when we are shrinking in population and have a lot of open space, this is Toledo. I think there's somebody here from Toledo in the class today. This is a master plan we did for Toledo in 2004 or 5. And it looked at open space. And so you can see, and parks. So things that are green are parks, and so you can see those colored. The things that are white around them, the kind of little blobs, are the areas of the city of Toledo that are less than a 5-minute walk from a park. And then all the charcoal is those sections of Toledo that are more than 5-minute walk to a park. And you can see, to my eye, about half seems sort of underserved by parks. Now, how can I judge that a 5-minute walk is underserved? By this study from MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, that is from their real estate program, and Jun is a graduate of there, and I think he can speak to this, but it asked this simple question: what is the premium people pay for a house and lot, this is single family stuff, based on its distance to a park? So here's the distance, 100 feet, 300, 600, 1,300 there, and then here's the sales premium. So if you're close to a park, 100 feet of a park, a 24% premium, right? If it gets down to a quarter mile, it's down to 0. So those whole sections of Toledo that have no parks are missing a lot of value. You can assess value both by the individual that's willing to pay the premium, the tax collector, the neighbors that might benefit from it, and so on. So this is money left on the table. These are the kinds of the things that are in the book. So LEED for neighborhood developments is also part of that commodity developed jointly by these three groups. And the prior slides also make the case that light bulb, Prius, green building, neighborhood, and corridor. We now can scale up sustainability. We can talk about them as tangibly as we can a light bulb. Oh, your neighborhood. Oh, a neighborhood's a half mile on the side. It's got a network of streets. It's got a mix of uses. It's got a diversity of housing types, et cetera, and the corridor with it. Right? So, second step to take over the world, roll back standards and subsidies. Now, what the heck do you mean by that? So sprawl, that auto-dependent thing that Detroit did, and Chicago did, and New York did, and Phoenix perfected, and Tucson perfected, it's this interlocking system of finance, land regulations, development norms, et cetera, that meant that people made their best money quickly and easily by doing sprawl, consuming cheap, buying cheap farmland, holding it for a while, eventually viewing it as inventory to put large lot houses out on it. So those rules perpetuate even after the markets change and we want something different. Now, the urban-rural transect, if you haven't heard about it, is a tool to govern the simple idea that you don't want to regulate all types of land the same. This posits the idea that humans actually settle across a spectrum of place types, from the very wilderness to the very downtown, and then districts, which are campuses and airports and things like that. So regulations need to be attuned to their places. Years after we know we don't want that, or we shouldn't be doing it, however you want to view it. Anyway, so fixing the rules is part of it. And there's just this really simple idea that codes often require minimum amounts of things we want less of. Get this, we want less of it, but the code's asking not for a maximum, but a minimum. And here's my list, off-street parking, wide streets, bright lights, building setbacks. These are things that are contrary, in my world, to what we want. So this is what we call the min-max project, which is go into your code and change the word minimum to maximum, and maximum to minimum, and see if anybody notices, right? So don't change the numbers. Don't fight about the numbers. Just, it's 4 per thousand, 5 per thousand, that's cool. The numbers didn't change. It's just the word, right? And then here's the opposite, things that set maximums, on things we want more of, and here we are there. And then the next level down in terms of controls and sustainable codes is this idea that you can zone things through FAR, you can zone things through design guidelines, or you can zone things through form-based codes, which are, second time I've mentioned it in this talk, I think a really cool tool that if it isn't taught at the school, really ought to be by next time I'm here, whenever that is. And then this issue that LEED ND, which we will talk about only slightly, is illegal across the country. So when we did the Chicago Center for Green Technology, we had two permitting issues with the building, and I'll tell you what they were. One was waterless urinals. And waterless urinals, the issue there was that the plumbers union in Chicago said, we are drawing a line in the sand, we're not letting this ever happen here. Why? Because there's no plumbing and there's no jobs. So the negotiation was about, well, could we plumb it and install it and leave dead end the pipes in the wall? And they said no to that, and they were smart. And why would you say no to that? He said, well, that's the first step, because you're going to start them, they're going to gain market acceptance, and then somebody will say, what's with the pipes? Get rid of the pipes and the jobs will go away. So in fact, I had a stack of, I thought it was about public health and, flies and I don't know what. So I had a big stack of things. Two doctors standing by on the phone and face to face with the chief plumbing inspector, who was also the head of the plumbers union. He said, over my dead body. So we didn't get that. And then the second one was our geothermal system, which we just made the mistake of calling, instead of calling them shafts, because they drill a deep shaft, so we called them wells. And that was a big mistake, because it ended up at the water board, and they thought we're trying to, install a competing potable water system to the city water system. So we got corrected on that. But those were two fairly small technical issues with, a pretty pushing the limits green building. LEED ND violates basic subdivision, basic zoning. If you pull out wherever you live, pull out your zoning code, get online, they're all online, and look and see the LEED and D criteria if you want to look that up, and compare it, and you'll find out it's legal. So there's a 3-step process. Make it legal, make it easy, and I say over time, just require the darn thing, because it solves so many problems. So step 3, change the local thinking, practice, and culture. And of the 3, this is the longest, as you might imagine. So, can we technically do all the things we're talking about? Absolutely. There's no inventions required. Of course, innovations will continue, technology will get better, but we don't really need that. Our barriers are all in our heads, honestly, in terms of what we want to spend our money on and how the lifestyle we want to lead. I show this picture to say this might have been the American dream home circa, 1988 or 1993 or something, called a McMansion pretty much, triple garage door, etc., etc. A dinosaur. This house is a dinosaur. Nobody wants it. The demographics are going to smaller families. No one wants to maintain it, heat it, buy it, pay it off, anything like that. So I show you this little transformation to get you visualizing, which is, this may be what we need to do with this house. So let's go back. This was kind of fun, right? How many families live there now? 1. How many families could live there? 3. Look here. There's a new door. The 3rd garage space is now the entry to an apartment unit. You go in the door, there's 2 units, a left and a right. So it's like, townhouses, a pair of them, and then the 3rd unit sort of saddles over the garage. There's horses, right? Horses. Fixin' salads over here. Now, again, back to this idea of rules and regulations. Now, a subdivision is one of the most tightly controlled constructions of human beings, right? Typically, a subdivision ordinance would not allow you to put the solar panels, the wind turbines. You're often required to have Kentucky bluegrass by homeowners association rules in your front yard. So the garden, the sign would be considered a commercial sign and exempt. The horse would be exempt. The multiple dwelling units exempt. So this might be the thing we absolutely need to do to make that obsolete housing type provide utility and affordable housing, and maybe the kid that goes away to college and comes home needs their own way to come and go and so on. This is resilient. This is resilient, and it's highly illegal all across the country. So that challenges us to think about what we want, and rules and so on. So this next thing, this is about changing culture. So this I say with great affection to my brethren and sisterin in Detroit. But in doing the book, we figured out this one statistic that seems to hold up, that on average by age 25, the average American has spent 1 year in a car. 1 year. Now, typically the car is running also all that time, I should say. It's not you're sitting there and the windows are rolled up and it's a sunny day and you're dying or something like that. You're going somewhere, the motor is running. So that's quite a lot of time. And to visualize, oh, my newborn, I can't wait till their year is up. They can be back out in captivity, whatever, out of their captivity. So driving, this is a big deal. We have issues with it. So, these are 2005 numbers, but you respect them for being damn close to where we are today. The average American drives 10,000 miles a year. The average American family drives virtually once around the planet every year, right? So I grew up in Detroit. There would be 7 of us, we'd have 7 cars, and we'd decide where you want to go based on cuisine. And so it was not uncommon for that to be a 15 or 20 mile drive to get to pizza and back, right? In Chicago, we absolutely walk to where we go. It's just the way the city's laid out, it's the culture. So I'm just saying this is quite a lot. This footnote, caption, is a good one. Societal addictions are easier to spot in cultures other than one's own. So I've never been to an opium den, and based on this picture, I'm not actually that interested. Maybe the first few minutes would be kind of high, but then it just looks like a drag. But anyway, these people are addicted. These people are totally addicted, as are we to lots of things. Chief amongst them driving. So, and these are challenges. I'm not telling you something you don't already know. This is a map of how much Americans have driven over the decades. And so, in 1930, average American drove 1,000 miles, 1970, 4,000, 2000, it was 8,000, and, aiming way up, right? The trajectory was way up. So back when the book came out, we proposed this idea of what if by 2030 we set ourselves a target, intellectual target, not a binding mandate target, that said, could we by 2030 somehow rejigger things or rethink how we live and so on, so that we drove as much as we did in 1970. That was the vision. So, basically that this would be symmetrical. Watch this curve. This is a laugh line, right? Like, humans have never changed their conduct that fast for anything. Abatement of smoking, no. Anything. So this is a kind of preposterous proposition, right? But it would be a good one if we could do it, right? But what I would say about it, what it reveals to me is this. So growing up in Detroit, this is the car I wish our family had. We never had this. This is those of a certain age, a Plymouth Barracuda. Really cool car. What was cool about it? You could sleep in back, and you could have kids would always get the sleeping bags, and you could watch the stars and sleep in back. It was really, really cool. What was different then, as compared to today, was that the relationship between us and the car was one of pleasure. So in that time, and those of us remember this, parents would always say, kids, get in the car, we're going for a drive. And this is going to be fun. And the kids would go, oh, Mom, I don't want to go. But we would go. And the parents clearly enjoyed the time in the car as a delightful thing to do. This expression stopped being used in America about 1990, right? There was no ever fun ride in a car, right? It stopped being true. I mean, we were conceived in cars. We had a good time in cars. Detroit, we should be proud of how much fun we had in a car. But my point to you, the kind of cultural switch to consider is, I would love to have a life where I could go back in time and rent a Barracuda or a Mini Cooper or a smart car or a Prius on demand, right? I'd love to do that on occasion, but do I want to be dependent on that? Absolutely not. And so the difference is joy and pleasure versus dependence, right? Think of those opium addicts when we look at the car. So we love cars, we just don't want to be dependent on them. So, and then how does this translate into land use? A lot of things that planners can do to add value is to enable things to become something else in the future. So here's a dumb big box store, right? Generally speaking, they don't migrate or evolve to become anything else, but they could. You could insist that the plan be laid out as though future streets were going to come. You could insist on inline retail stores, so it's not just the big box that's getting all the money, that small locally owned businesses get some. You could call these street trees, install street trees, which generally speaking are banned by the fire marshal, who considers this, what do they call it, the fire lane, right? You've seen those signs like, don't park here, fire lane, right? So you can't legally have street trees there because it's a fire lane. If it's a building on a regular street, it's called a street. And you can put whatever you want there, but this is a fire lane. So how can that fire lane transform to become a street? And then over time, that it evolves, and the parking lot is seen as a future development site, and it can intensify if the economics justify. So, further to changing the culture, here's this one. The idea that in a couple of years there will be either an app for that, or your Facebook page will have a little thermometer that says drives a lot, drives a little, it's complicated, whatever, something like that. But that your sex appeal would be inversely proportionate to the amount of time you spend in a car. And I will say that the 20-somethings that I know, the kids in my office and so on, without going through the sort of artificiality of a cartoon like this, register something like that. Like, people are cool that kind of live the low-impact lifestyle in some ways than others. So this is a beautiful picture, by the way, to me, that is a box of sustainable urbanism books. Really, it smells good. I kind of can spend a few minutes sort of lounging around, enjoying it. Really fun. And if we, for people that get the book, we also have these perks. This button. This button which, Detroit, you're missing something. I'm just saying, the rest of the country is wearing this button and walking around smiling. So, consider it. But doesn't that sort of change your mindset, like what's fun, where do I want to be, and so on and so on. And then this, the bumper sticker, your SUV makes you look fat. Again, an attempt to humor, highlight, embarrass, whatever. So you can sort of see what we're talking about here. So in the end, this is, about putting out there a new vision, changing our culture, changing the things we value. In conclusion, we've got the technical moxie to do zero-net buildings. We've got the technical know-how to do zero-net neighborhoods. We have barriers in the form of, siloization, specialization amongst professions, the failure of there being an authority that can say, do it here, right? Those are the barriers. But the biggest barrier I contend is the barrier of imagination, and the barrier of vision, and the barrier of leadership. And so those of you who are students especially, this is the take-home message, become leaders, absolutely become leaders. Advocate, become effective spokespeople. Advocate with facts, with statistics that support your position so that they are rock solid and bomb-proof. You cannot just assert things that you like or you think are fun. Have your numbers lined up to justify what you're doing. And if you do that, we need hundreds and thousands of you, and that you'll be well positioned, I think, in the job market. So even though this picture isn't a US picture, this is Amsterdam, which is a pretty cool place too. It is that kind of thing, like who wouldn't like one of these near their house? Like pretty cool, right? You'd go there, you'd hang out. This is sort of Starbucks on the street and so on. So anyway, I'll leave you with this idea that our biggest challenge is leadership and vision. And I think we'll do some Q&A, is that right? Thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have time, hopefully, for a few questions. Any questions? I do not see a question.
There's one over there.
Okay. Question.
At a house in Chicago, you had a window notice.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so the question is, the Yannell house that I showed you has 53% glazing. 53% of the walls are glazed. This was designed by my partner, Jonathan Boyer, and we fight about these things. So I think the optimal range of glass for that is in the 30s, 30, 35, 38, something like that. So it's way overglazed to my way of thinking. So, so the answer is the client liked that and had the means, in this case, to just buy enough renewable energy systems to overpower, to me, excess glass. Now, all the glazing is triple glazed, actually triple glazed. The envelope is like super everything, right? The envelope is great. The glass is obviously the weak link, and the fact that we have so much of it is a super weak link. So if I had designed it, it would have had 10 to 15% less glass, but it's lovely. It's like being outdoors. It really is. But I was going to say one other thing. It perpetuates I love the house. I love the work that was done. It is a modern landmark. It's great. But there's this interesting story from the inside workings of LEED from a couple years ago that's worth repeating. So, LEED struggles, USGBC struggles with LEED on how, with what aggressiveness to increase its standards, like especially for energy efficiency. So there's this whole, all the people that say, we've got to go much faster, much more quickly, all this stuff to be aggressive in energy. And USGBC says, well, we have people that are just learning LEED. We can't sort of change it on them tomorrow to double what they had to do. So there's this tension. But LEED was debating, USGBC was debating increasing the reference it did in ASHRAE. And a large developer based in Houston, I was there 2 weeks ago and heard this story again, lobbied them and said, we only do glass box office buildings, and if you adopt this new level of ASHRAE, we won't be able to certify at all under LEED, and so we'll drop out, so don't do it. So it was interesting, this sort of the willingness to fight to keep a modernist glass box transparency architecture, when in truth, as the energy requirements ratchet up, that will be increasingly suboptimal. So, and the glass box will never make it. So, I asked the question if historical styles might just we might recapitulate them, right? Because there's these studies that suggest buildings from the 20s and 30s do still pretty well, right? Skinny floor plate, good natural lighting, a fair amount of solid wall to keep the heat in and the cool out, like that. So,
Thank you.
Or answer.
Question back there?
I noticed most of your LEED programs are in North America.
Yes.
Have you ever taken it to a third world country, tropical, maybe? Even India was so far.
Okay, how about Nigeria?
Nigeria sounds good.
Okay, yeah, I don't have it to show you, but yeah, we did a project in outside of Lagos, in Lekki State, it's called, and that was a real eye-opener. We were invited by a Chicago developer, a friend of mine who is also Nigerian, who brought us there. The Chinese are all over Africa. They're making alliances to exchange essentially access to resources in exchange for land and labor. And so they had a contract with the government for control of all this land, and did a terrible job just thoughtlessly sort of planning it and clearing the jungle and all this sort of stuff. So we should talk after, because that's a long story. But did you have a specific you wanted to?
Well, I'm more into the reducing of poverty and housing.
Yeah.
Because it only breeds more diseases.
Yes.
And being a person from Jamaica, I was thinking of improving the lot of the people in their housing situation.
Yeah.
But it only decreases their educational values.
Yeah.
I mean, it might sound like a long thing, but improper housing affects education, health, and everything.
We're going out drinking after this, so I think you're going to have to join us. But I did a seminar in Jamaica, in Kingston, with the Prime Minister, not the current one, but the previous one. So we could have a lot to talk about. Yeah.
Very good. There's one more question here, and then we'll take it outside.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
14 years or 12 plus years that you've been doing sustainable design, programming, buildings, neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Have you done any long-term monitoring of your structures, buildings, to actually accumulate data to help sell to the next project?
Yeah.
As that, have you thought about going around and doing a lecture series to professionals such as architects and engineers to help sell the idea to the client?
Yeah.
The biggest hurdle that I find is financial.
Yeah. So everybody heard the two-part question, which is do we monitor the actual performance once it's built? And the secondly is sort of ideas on overcoming financing barriers. So let me take the first one. The answer is a lot of our buildings are on these various national studies. I forget who funds them, USDOE, you probably know. And they come in and do these reports. And I will just, air some dirty laundry on us. Chicago Center for Green Technology is not doing as well as it was modeled to do. The one I didn't show, Chrissy Weber Landscapes, was projected to be 57% better than the code at that time, and is meeting the number. But that took like 2 or 3 commissionings and recommissionings. And CCGT, the issue with it is we did lighting controls. Again, in 1999 and 2000, they were very much kind of cobbled together from off-the-shelf components. I don't think the light sensors quite did what they were supposed to do. So the lights were on a lot. The air conditioning was compensating for the presence of the lights that didn't need to be on. I think that's a lot of the sort of shortcomings there. So the answer is we don't, but others do. But that's a really good thing, because there's also, we've seen the commissioning studies that the actual performance is 50% to 200% of what you thought it was going to be. So that's a big issue. And then the second one, the cost. Wow. I think that the way people come to us because they're interested in this and they want to be led to a better outcome than they would without us, right? So that's kind of why they're there. So given that context, we have a pretty good luck on selling people on a lot of the basic measures. Even environmental groups, who are a chunk of our clients, we often offer like a basic, medium, and high, and the high scares them into doing the medium. That's what I've found. So, in fact, there's great consumer research on this. As soon as you add another premium product, you can take away the one on the bottom, and they'll pick the one in the middle. Add two at the top, they'll pick the one in the middle. Just keep, and it just moves them up. So A, B, C, they pick B. So design your B really well, because that's the one you want them to pick. So, but you'd be surprised. You know, this is not your question. I just want to say this, and this will be the last thing we'll go drinking or whatever. But this idea, what intrigues me, those of us who got architecture degrees in the physical design of buildings. You know, that's what I studied twice. This whole idea of conduct, designing decisions, marketing, salesmanship, all that sort of stuff, I think is like at the center of what I do, more so than technical skills. I mean, we've got the technical skills, yes. Many people in this audience do, yes, but that ain't necessarily getting it done. It's this other thing. It's about leadership and connecting and making the case. So, you know, I've said it all day to the students, but absolutely become leaders, become persuasive, figure out who the leader in the room is, buttonhole them, sit next to them at dinner, buy them a drink, put your arm around them, kiss them, make them vote for your project, whatever it is. But, you know, you don't want to do the best idea that sits on the shelf. You really don't. We don't have the time for that. Shouldn't be your aspiration. You should propose the best thing and have it implemented. That's my closing thing. So thanks for letting me riff off your question.
I took a bottom line out of that. It involves drinking. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Was there one?
You mentioned the one project, you said people behave differently.
Yeah.
In what respect?
So I'm not the expert on this, but I can point you to a resource that's pretty good. So the client, this is the BedZed project. The developer is a not-for-profit called Bioregional. If you go on their website, you'll get a whole thing. So the result of that is that they have gone and specialized as a not-for-profit in what they call environmental concierge. Essentially, all of the soft architecture of the place and how it's managed to induce that better conduct. And so you can hire them to go to your neighborhood or your building to get similar results. And so they have a 10-step thing, and it's pretty comprehensive.
But how different is the guidance? How is the conduct?
I mean, what do they do differently?
I guess it was my understanding that the people who live there behave differently.
They do.
In what respect? How do they behave?
Well, I can give you anecdotes. I'll just say that it's the part that's quantified is 37% of the reduction of ecological footprint or harm or burden, whatever, comes from change of conduct. It's a lot of things. So it is working at home. There's one for you. The fact that you can actually, there's commercial space and residential space in the same building or on the same block. So if you have a business, rent here, you won't have to go anywhere. There's a lot of sharing activities that go on. I don't know, trust me, there's a website. And you've asked me a great question. It'll go into the next edition of the book, by the way. I promise to be better prepared in a couple of years. So.
Very good. Well,
okay.
This brings us to the end of tonight's session, but before we go, let me just remind everyone that November 17th is our next lecture. Evan Roth will be here. He was trained initially as an architect, but then went to Parsons, the New School of Design, where he currently also teaches, and he's involved in interaction art, digital art, and a whole genre of arts. So we think it'll be very entertaining. That's November 17th, same time, same place. For those of you that are particularly from the profession, if you need a poster, you can get our things on about the program online. But if you want a poster to hang up in your office, just give us your card and we'll make sure to mail one out to you. We don't want to print too much paper, but sometimes it's good for mass distribution to put it on a poster in your office. Yes?
Glenn, thanks for recognizing me. I just wanted to say thank you, Doug. It's great to see you again, and let everyone know that in the spring, Doug doesn't even know this yet, but we're bringing him back for another day-long forum on LEED for neighborhood development with the planners and the development community. And just want you to put that on.
And that workshop will occur here in the spring on a Friday, right? I believe, isn't that the plan? Yes. More to come. So thank you all for coming tonight. Thank you so much, Doug. We really appreciate it.